Alright, so our next one, we're going to graph y equals 2 sine of x. A equals 1. I'm sorry. Boop. A equals 2. B equals 1. Alright, so I put the general formula at the top here. Alright, I'm not going to write it again just because it gets tedious. So I have it up in front of me on my screen at home. So I'm just going to plug in the values of A and B as I go. My left endpoint is 0, 0. Nice easy one. First quarter point is pi over 2b, so pi over 2, and A, which is 2. Midpoint is pi over b, which is pi and 0. Third quarter point is 3 pi over b, so 3 pi over 2, negative A, which is negative 2. And then my right endpoint is 2 pi over b, 0. Now going by halves again. Pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi. Negative pi over 2, negative pi, 3 pi over 2, and negative 2 pi. Alright, plot my points. The only thing that's different here is my amplitude is higher. So I'm going to go up 2, down 2, down 2, up 2, down 2, up 2, up 2, down 2. My asymptotes on the x-intercepts. Okay. And the U's go on the peaks and the valleys. Alright, next one. A is 1, B is 1/3. So that means we're going to have to do a little more math when we plug in the B's. So left endpoint is 0, 0. Our next point is pi over 2b, so it's pi over 2 times 1/3 and A. So we get pi over 2/3. So then scratch work, pi over 1 multiplied by reciprocal, 3/2, which is 3 pi over 2. So we have 3 pi over 2, 1. My midpoint pi over b, so pi over 1/3, 0. So pi over 1 times reciprocal of 1/3 gives me 3 pi. So I got 3 pi and 0. And then my third quarter point is 3 pi over 2b, so 3 pi over 2 times 1/3, negative A, which is negative 1. So we have 3 pi over, I'm not ready to do that part yet. So this becomes 3 pi over 2/3, negative 1. it'll be 3 over 1 times 3 halves. This gives us 9 pi over 2. And then my right endpoint is 2 pi over b, so over 1/3, 0. So I'm going to get 2 pi over 1 times 3 over 1 gives me 6 pi. And 0. Okay. I'm trying to figure out my scale. Maybe I could just go by pi's. That means in between is a half pi each time. 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi, 5 pi, 6 pi, 7 pi, 8 pi. Alright, so my first point's at 0, 0. And now amplitude's 1, so we're going up and down 1. So at 3 pi over 2, so that's 1 pi and a half. So it's in between pi and 2 pi, so I'm going to go up 1. And then I come down to 3 pi and 0. And then it looks like we're at 9 pi over 2, so that's 4 pi and a half. So that's right there. And if you can kind of see the pattern, you see where the next one's going to be. So we're kind of jumping, it's every 1.5. So then that means the next one will be 1.5. Will be up there. Come to the left. It's going to be the same scale on that side. So we're going to go 1.5 down, half and a 1 up, 1.5 up, half and a 1 down, 1.5 down. Okay, so I'll draw my asymptotes on the x-intercepts. And my u's. I don't get a full one all the way there on the left. It's alright though. We're all the way on the right. So that's cosecant of 1/3. Moving on to cosecant of x minus pi. So that means I got graph y equals sine of x plus pi. So these have our horizontal and vertical shifts now. So a is 1, b is 1, h is negative pi. That comes from setting the inside equal to 0, and you get x equals negative pi. And then k is 0. So step 2, left endpoint is at 0, 0. You gotta subtract pi from the x value because it's a horizontal shift, so that means it's shifting left or right. So we get negative pi and 0. First quarter point is pi over 2b, so pi over 2, and 1, so minus pi. So scratch work, I'll do pi over 2 minus pi over 1, common denominators, so equals pi over 2 minus 2 pi over 2. which gives me negative pi over 2. Negative pi over 2, 1. Midpoint is pi over b, so it's pi 0 minus pi. It's a nice easy one. 1 minus 1 just gives me 0, 0. Third quarter point is 3 pi over 2b, so 3 pi over 2. Negative a. So scratch work again. Don't forget to subtract pi. So we get 3 pi over 2 minus pi over 1. Common denominators. So you get 3 pi over 2 minus 2 pi over 2. Gives me 1 pi over 2. So it's pi over 2, negative 1. And my right endpoint is 2 pi over b, so it's 2 pi, 0, minus pi. So 2 minus 1 gives me 1. So I get pi, 0. So my scales, I'm going to go by I guess half pi's. So pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi. Plot my points. So we shifted left, so my first point is no longer at the origin. It's going to be at negative pi 0. So that means it's going to be right here. And then I'm using my amplitude going up and down 1. So up 1, down, down, up, down, down, up. The donuts are by the sofa. Sorry about that. My asymptotes. Whoops, I whiffed on that one. X-intercepts. Now my curves. P, valley, peak, valley, peak. There we go. So that's a horizontal shift. Got one more to do. Example number 5. Okay, so we have A equals 3/2, B equals 1, H equals pi over 2, K equals 0. So my left endpoint is 0, 0. So we are adding pi over 2. We're shifting right. Okay. So I'll be at pi over 2, 0. First quarter point is pi over 2b, so pi over 2 and a, which is 3/2 or 1.5, plus pi over 2. So a half plus a half gives me 1. So this will be at pi and 3/2. Midpoint is pi over b, so pi and 0. Plus a half, so 1 plus a half is 3/2. So you get 3 pi over 2, 0. And my third quarter point is 3 pi over b, so 3 pi over 2, and then negative a, so negative 3 halves. Add pi over 2. So it'll give me 4 pi over 2, which is really just 2 pi. And then my right endpoint is 2 pi over b, so 2 pi, 0, plus pi over 2. So that's 4 halves. Alright, so scratch work, so you don't have to do it in your head. So 2 pi over 1 plus pi over 2, common denominators, multiply top and bottom by 2. So 4 pi over 2 plus pi over 2 is 5 pi over 2. Okay, so I get 5 pi over 2 and 0. So this one's going a little further than my normal scale of every other one going by a half. So it just means I use every tick mark to be a half. So half pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi, 1, 3, that means 5 pi over 2, 3 pi, 7 pi over 2, and 4 pi. As you can see, the halves goes 1, 3, 5, 7. So odd numbers and then whole numbers in between. Okay. Points. Pi over 2, 0. Pi and 3 halves. So it's 1 and 1 half. So that's up here. So we're just going up by 1 1/2. So come back down. 1 1/2, 0, up 1 1/2, down, down 1 1/2. So we're going to continue the trend, so down 1 1/2, 0, up 1 1/2, down, down, up, up, down, down. Draw my x-intercepts for my vertical asymptotes. It just looks like this because the scale's different. You can obviously use whatever scale you want, but okay, so down, up, down, and then the pattern just alternates. Or if you're looking at the top half, it's every other one goes up like this. So skip 1, up, then we go down, down, down. Alright, so that's graphing cosecant. Remember to use sine to help you graph cosecant.